Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're really honored to be with all of you today in celebration of Trans Day of Visibility. Trans Day of Visibility is super important to me as a trans person, and also it's important to me as someone who loves trans literature. So often our communities are depicted in ways that are like, necessarily hard and sad. But one of the things that I'm really excited about tonight, as we celebrate A Million Quiet Revolutions by Robin Gow, is that this is not a sad book. We don't just have to only focus on the hard aspects of our lives. Those stories need to be told as well. It's really nice to get to celebrate a romance, and a YA romance at that. And we are joined by Tobly McSmith, who is also a YA romance lover and writer.
Oh yeah.
Big time. So I'll introduce Tobly first. Tobly is the author of Stay Gold and Act Cool, young adult novels about love, staying true to yourself, and transgender issues. He is the founder and co-director of the Stay Gold Fund, providing gender-affirming healthcare and clothing to transgender people in need. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that at the end of the night, so be sure to stay tuned all the way through to the end. Tobly is the co-creator and writer of 8 musical parodies that have been played thousands of shows around the world, including Friends, the musical parody. And Tobly was born in Texas and now lives in Brooklyn with an undisclosed number of cats. We'll be sharing more info about his books as well as the Stay Gold funds. But we're really excited to have you here because your books are very much they really make sense to me in conversation with each other.
Yes.
Robin Gow is the person of the hour tonight. Robin is a trans and queer poet, editor, and educator from rural Pennsylvania. They are the director and founder of Transcendent Connections, an organization that provides trans education resources to support trans youth. Gow also founded the New York City Trans and Queer Reading Series, Gender Reveal Party. They live in Pennsylvania with their pugs, Gertrude and Eddie. So I'm loving the pet synergy that we have going
Oh
on.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And also that y'all both have done so much work for trans youth and folks who are coming into knowledge of themselves, which of course is so much of what we are about at Charis. So it is a real honor to have you both here, and welcome to everyone in the chat as well. The last thing I'll say is you can of course ask questions. Just put them in the ask a question box at the bottom center of the screen or in the chat, and I'll be sure to put them over on the ask a question page so that we can bring them into the chat. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Definitely. Hi, Robin. Look, one of my cats just jumped up here to say hi.
Oh, it's
I have
amazing.
I have 3 cats, so I beat out your pugs by 1 if they had
My
to fight
pugs
it
are
out.
my pugs are not here, or they would be barking. They are a little bit
Wow.
naughty.
Nice.
Yeah.
I am honored to be here helping you launch your book and with one of my favorite bookstores and ER2, one of the best people around. So this is such a fun night. Thank you for letting me celebrate with this. And I think we want to kick it off with you reading, right?
Yeah, definitely. And just thank you for being here. And I'm really excited for our conversation.
Oh, definitely. Lots of secrets. We're going to spill lots of secrets.
So I'm gonna read a poem from the beginning of the book. I was looking around, I realized that a novel told in poems, lots is revealed in every poem. So I got to pick from the beginning, but that's a good thing. So I'm going to read a poem that's titled, As We Got Older, I Noted All the Things I More Than Like About You. 1. Your excitement when you draw a new character. Now that we have phones, you just text me pictures, but when we were little, you call the house phone and describe your drawings to me, saying, and his arms are really bright blue, and his eyes are brown, and he can shoot fire from his eyes. 2. The way you hoist yourself and me up into trees in the park. I stay on the low branches as you climb higher. Your brother taught you how to climb trees. When the two of you were both little, you tried to climb to see if you could talk to God, shouting at the clear sky, trying to get through to him. 3. The way you watch me bake banana bread and always crack the eggs just right. I can never do it. I used to be the egg cracker for mom when she'd bake, but I'm always too gentle. I push the shell slowly until it gives, so tiny flecks of shell always end up in the batter. You don't hesitate. A steady flick of the wrist, a clean fracture of the shell.
Nice. Beautiful. God, I have so much respect for people that write novels in verse because I have trouble like forming sentences and you make it all beautiful. Every word works and
Aw, thank you. Well, I feel the same about prose. I guess, I don't know, I feel like stories come from me in poems.
mm. Who's some of your favorite like poetry people?
Oh, it's so hard to start with. There's so many.
Yeah.
I guess I'll like trace myself back and think about like the first poet that I like read that kind of opened me up to like thinking more of myself as a poet was Anis Mosgani, who writes like, well, what I was watching was more of his like slam poetry kind of things.
Mhm.
And he writes all sorts of really cool, and he's like a storyteller in his poems often. And then as I studied poetry more, like I read more poets from different eras and all that kind of thing. And right now, um, I think that like a YA poet that like also opened me up was Billy Merrill,
Mm.
and the novel in verse Vanilla. That opened me up to like queer novels in verse.
Wow.
Um, and there's just my brain is going so many directions
Uh,
because there's so many people
Definitely.
that I like, but those are just like two that I'm thinking of right now.
Have
Um,
you read Dean Atta? I'm probably saying the last name wrong.
I don't
He did
know.
Black Flamingo and
Oh,
New
I
Book.
did.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. That
Beautiful,
one is
right?
stunning.
So
Yes. I,
amazing.
like, picked it up because it was on the corner of a shelf, and I was like, "This looks amazing," just by the cover, and I
Yeah.
read it in, like, one sitting.
Yes. The UK cover was beautiful, the US, and I'm so excited about the new book, Only on the Weekends. I love that title. Love that title.
Definitely.
So let's talk about titles. How did you come upon your title? I think it's beautiful. I love it.
It's interesting because one of the things that happened with the book is I wrote the whole book originally set not as the American Revolution, but as their interest being in World War I, which is very different, a tone and a different whole kind of thing. And it had a totally different title when I like pitched it to my agent and such. Um, and so I did a rewrite setting it then in the revolution for a myriad of reasons. But I think that what it made me think about with revolutions was I was thinking, I guess the first thing I Googled was like, I like wonder how many trans people are in America, like, or in the world. And it kind of made me, first of all, I got like a side interest in statistics, and then also thinking about how like they are like inherently like there's definitely more than a million trans people. It's definitely an underestimate because so
Definitely.
many people are probably scared to write it, all that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
I guess I was thinking about like then thinking about just like trans people in history, like everyone's like deeply complex, like beautiful lives. And I guess that's like one of the things that like motivated me a lot behind the characters in the book. And so the title kind of came from that. Um, and I guess the word quiet I think about because of like there's so much that we don't get to know about like the history of trans
Hmm.
people throughout history. There's like these brilliant quiet moments of like I mean everyone's life is immensely interesting, but I'm really interested in the lives of trans people from different eras. And so I was thinking about the people in the present and the history. So yeah, that's kind of how A Million Quiet Revolutions came into being.
Yes. Oh, yes. I love that. The million. There's definitely more. There's definitely more. I
Yeah.
think we're so all over the place. um, I love that. So when you were getting into this, I like the history aspect. Is that something that has always you've always been drawn to the history and of trans people? And they followed a couple, right, in the Revolutionary
Yes.
War. Was that couple?
Yeah.
So was there a different couple in World War I, or you found this couple?
Yeah. So I made up so okay, so the title World War I is my brother is a World War I reenactor. Um,
Yes,
and I was
amazing.
so fascinated by that because and I think that it opened me up to thinking about reenacting and the history of wars differently, because I'm very like opposed to like thinking about violence in general. Like it just kind of skeeves me out.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I just like I imagine war reenacting as very like macho dudes being like, I don't
Right.
know, glorifying it.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is like that, just hearing from my brother. But then my brother talked about how for him it was like, I don't know, it was like bearing witness to people who went through this, and like that's how he thinks about reenacting. And that opened me up to
Mhm.
thinking about like, wow, like there are lots of ways to like approach and think about these complicated, horrible times through all different kinds of lenses. And I think that that's really interesting and valuable. And I was like, I wonder what would happen if there were queer people at these reenacting events. And there are, because queer people are everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where the World War One aspect came in. But I've always personally been interested in queer and trans history, and honestly, history in general. I've always been fascinated with it. My dad used to work at a local historical society, and he would bring me for meetings. And the history isn't anything like earth-shattering because it's a small farm town in Pennsylvania. Um, but I was like, but I don't know, I would like look at these like glass cases of all different kinds of like artifacts, even if it was just like school hats and stuff like that. And I
Mhm.
guess I'm just really interested in the like I think I said it like when I was talking about the title, but just like the small intricacies of people who lived before me. And when I like understand myself as a queer person, then thinking about the complexities of how people understood themselves and like those kinds of beautiful things. I honestly think that I would love to explore that in like any era. And I think that the reason I gravitated towards the revolution, now I'm getting closer to answering a question.
I love it.
Um,
I'm here for
the
it.
reason I gravitated towards the revolution was because when I was in fifth grade, I remember learning the fact that AFAB people participated in like fairly large numbers by binding their chests, and I used to pretend on the school player field that I was one of them, um, which is no coincidence, I'm sure. Um, and I guess like that prompted the thought that the characters have, which is like, there's no reason why some of them might not have been men. And I think that it's just like speaks to like the cisgender lens that like history is given to us is that like everyone was like, oh well, they just didn't like being women, or they like just, which is like that's exactly how a lot of trans
Yeah.
people feel, but like just assuming that it was to escape, only to escape societal roles. And I think that that's
Mhm.
probably true for some of the people who did that, but I feel like it's an oversweeping generalization to assume that none of them actually wanted to be men or were men, like trans men basically.
Right. Wow. And have you attended these recreations with your brother?
I have not.
Oh,
It's because I'm a little scared.
I get it.
Well, they have like real fake explosives, but I have seen them make their costumes, and get all suited up. My dad also participates in it, and now
Love
my
it.
brother does like Civil War too. So I see him as he like makes his things and does all that kind of stuff. I always wanted to go to a thing to do study more, but what's interesting is that's when the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then there was like probably about 2 years where they weren't happening. They've only kind of really, the larger ones have only really kind of just started to re-meet again, for safety. Yeah.
The pandemic hurt everything, even
Yeah.
war reenactments.
Yeah. It's not something you would think of, but it did. Yeah.
So when you're studying the history of trans people, like, do you have books to suggest, or where did you go to find this info online?
Mostly online. I would say the other part of it is like I'm interested in I do actually have some books. I'm trying to remember the exact titles. They aren't about, there is one book that's about like trans men during the revolution.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm Googling it right now because I should know the title. But there is another book.
This is, have you heard of this one? This is a good one.
Oh yeah, that one's great.
That's
Definitely.
probably everyone's heard of this one, right? Yeah.
There's just this one book. I read it and I had to get it from a library because I couldn't find a copy. Um, But there's also a book called Redressing that I really liked, and I'm trying to focus on this book, but it's like the inspiration for my next book. It's about trans men who are cowboys. Um, it's am I allowed to like type things in the chat?
I think so.
Redressing.
I don't think you'll be thrown out for that.
I want to share it. It was Yeah, it's called Redressing America's Frontier Past. And it also inspired me to think more about other I think what I like about it a lot. Oh, okay, I can see the chat. Cool. I'm gonna type that. So it's oh no, I put the Amazon link. That's not what I wanted to do.
Just use that
Ah,
link for information on how
yeah,
to buy
use
it
that link to
at
find
other
it. Don't buy it
books.
there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but that book was really interesting because it's focused a lot on just like the stories that are gathered from newspaper clippings. And that's what I find especially interesting is like these very small firsthand accounts. Um, and a lot of the inspiration behind the book is also that just like knowing people could have existed is enough. And that's not to say that I don't think historical research is valuable. I
Hmm.
just am sometimes research is like imagination, and maybe that sounds too fluffy, but I just think that there's been so long of people who aren't queer or gender expansive, like looking at these resources that, like, I mean, I'm sure in the next decades that we'll learn a lot more because there's more queer historians, there's more access
Hmm.
to that lens.
Hmm.
But while we don't have it, I think it's still exciting to be like, and the story of the two trans men is not a real story. It's something that I just made up, but it
Nice.
could be real, and it probably is. Like, I believe it's real. I believe that
Definitely.
there's two trans men who are soldiers who are probably in love. I mean, like,
For sure.
they probably found each other, and like that's just like how history works is that people who are similar experiences usually find each other. And I don't know, I think that it's totally possible. And I specifically wanted to pick a story that wasn't real because then people couldn't
Mhm.
research it or try to debunk
Exactly.
it. It's
Yep.
like kind of foolproof because that it's just like that's like ours, and like and it belongs to the characters in that way because of that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that sounds smart. AJ Sass is watching, another author, loves the cowboy concept. I mean, who wouldn't? Come on,
Yeah.
cowboys and cow boots and bolo ties. They definitely wore some bolo ties for sure.
I feel like cowboys are like somehow connected to trans mask culture, and I
Yes,
just know of like many artists who've drawn cowboys and that was mostly the inspiration was like I love cowboys like as a aesthetic. Um,
definitely. As someone from Texas, I'm with you. With you on
yeah,
this. So let's talk about your characters, Aaron and Oliver, right?
yes.
How did you develop them? Is there one that's more like you? Is it where did these two characters come from?
I think that I took pieces of myself for both of them, which is interesting in that like I think that they're both not like me, but Oliver is very like me. Um, and that character is the one who's closest to my voice. Um, I think that specifically, like, I tried to give him some of like the optimism that I feel because I feel like that's something that I like wanted. I guess. Oh, okay. I phrased that wrong. I wanted him to have an optimism that I don't always feel.
Mm,
So that's kind of how he differs from me, is that like he is very like he's a very dreamy person and like he believes in like nuanced approaches to history and that like he's very like we were there and I just like I love his optimism towards not only like history but also like his relationships, his family, and so that was something that's not always me, but like idealistically, I would love to give that to myself, and so I wanted to give it to a character.
love that.
Um, the poeticness of Oliver is definitely me, like in that he processes a lot of his things through poetry, and through these like snapshot kind of reflections of his love for Aaron. Um, and then for Aaron, I think the pieces of me that are in him are a lot about like processing family relationships. Aaron's family is less accepting, and they're less accepting in the way that like I struggled with my family, because they're not outwardly hateful. They're just very not able to be there yet, and I
Hmm.
think that that's like an incredibly like painful experience. that is that's something that I have experienced, and I wanted a character to be able to work through that. And by the and like um I think the ways in which he processes it too are similar to me, in that like he turns to art and he's mad at his family, but he still loves them and he still has a really deep connection to them.
Mhm.
And so I think that that is also a lot of me. Um, something that's interesting that I've seen. I know I shouldn't read people's reviews of things
Uh,
because
you
it's just
know,
good to like
you
disconnect.
gotta
But
do
people
it.
have said that their yeah, people have said that their voices are similar, which I think, which is interesting, and I don't want to be like that's intentional, but I think that like something that's true about me is that my own way that I speak is very like infected by the people who are around me. Not infected makes it sound bad, but just like I am very like flexible to people around me, and I think that that's how Oliver is.
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing is that like some of the relationship dynamics are modeled after just like past really positive relationships that I've had with other trans people. Another aspect of the book is that I kind of wanted it to be like a love letter for like T for T relationships,
Mhm.
because I think that that's something that's not often represented, and I wanted to like I don't know give a space for that, um, and so a lot of pieces of the characters do come from like positive dynamics that I've been in.
I love that. Um, I've found that it's hardest to name my trans characters. I was curious if you found the same thing or how it was for you.
It's so hard. Well, because like you know that they had to choose it and you don't want to choose a name. Well, it's not that you don't want to. I just like know that there are very many like common trans names. And I don't want to name them that because I don't want other trans people to read it to like I don't know, not like it because it's not like them.
Yep.
Um And then also you have to think of like someone choosing a name because it's so different than being given a name. Everybody
Mhm.
deals with the name that they're given, whether they elect to choose a name or not. Like it's a different situation.
Yeah.
And they were named different things when in the previous version.
Whoa.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, and those names I still like those names a lot, and I'm going to use them in other books. But this, for their names in this book, I did research into what names were common during the American Revolution because I was like, well, they have to pick, it's got to be names like that for the soldiers' names. Um, and then from
Nice.
those names, I was like, what would a trans guy pick?
Yes.
because because some of them are, I mean, there's trans men on a monolith. I guess somebody could pick to be named something very formal, but I
Mhm.
was trying to pick something that was like, this would seem a little bit more colloquial in this time period. I forget what some of them were, but some of them were like very, I don't know, they sounded like they're from the 1700s. And I was like,
Yeah,
they probably would have a hard time with that.
right.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing in the struggle of that. Because you want to get it right. Like I want to get it right for this
Yeah.
kid, and yeah, that can be tricky.
You almost feel like you're the character picking your name
Yes.
because you're like, they're gonna be with this name forever. I don't know. I also
Right.
think that like, yeah, and it's true. I don't think about that for cis characters. I'm like, ah, whatever. Their name is this.
Yeah. Right.
I feel much more protective of the trans characters.
For sure. Oh, that's true. Yes, definitely protecting them. Is this your first full length novel?
Yes, yes,
Did
yeah.
anything surprise you about writing it, like through this? Like,
So many things. Especially because like I am like a poet of center. Like I write poetry all the time. Poetry is like my heart of things. And so, carrying a narrative is very hard. And so, like, the original draft of this, like, before I shared it with anybody, was really like a very insular relationship between two boys. It wasn't really quite yet like a novel, because I hadn't built out the world around them. And, like, I think doing a verse novel is very interesting because, um, you kind of have to build in like these little blocks, like the poems as blocks and like lining them together in different ways. Um, but I was surprised, I think that like as I continued to build, I like learned more about the story myself. I also like am kind of tragically don't plot very much. Like, and I've written a lot of novels now, like they're in draft forms and stuff, and I've found that that continues to work for me. But even if I'm writing in prose, I still need to do the same thing that I would do with poems, which is like write the relationship story and then write the world around the characters.
Mhm.
Um, which is cool because I found that process with this. Um, but yeah,
That's
it is
cool.
definitely hard. And writing poetry collections is super hard too, but like in a very different way. And there is a narrative with those too, I think, but it's not
Mhm.
the same as like, oh no, I forgot what happens with this one side character and it has to line up on the end
Right,
when they come back. Like,
right.
yeah.
That's amazing. I don't know anything about your writing history, like in poetry. Can you tell us like where this all started and how it's, you know?
Yeah. Um so I don't know how far back to go, but
Sure. Go all the way to birth.
I've always liked telling stories like from when I was little, and I used to only tell them in like graphic novels because I like have a hard time writing and reading, which is hilarious because I love reading and I love writing, but
Yeah.
it's mostly basically just like undiagnosed um someone on the autism spectrum, well, undiagnosed for a while, and then also just having some reading issues. So I used to tell stories with like pictures and stuff. And then the next most accessible thing became poems, because they're shorter and the language of poems is a lot more forgiving than prose because sometimes when you mess up the order of words in poems, it can be generative instead of like just being wrong. Which now I've learned a lot more with language and I feel more confident with exploring those things. But as a young person writing, it was like a way of exploring that kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, and then when I got to college, I like wanted to write the next great American novel because I don't know. I was I don't know what I thought. And my like teacher in my intro to creative writing class was like, "Have you considered not doing that? You should just keep going with the poetry thing." Then I went to grad school for poetry and I loved it. I I don't know, poetry is like part of my daily practice. It feels like part of who I am, and I just felt like I grew a lot in my graduate program, just being able to explore lots of poets and learn more about poetry. Um, but I always still did like writing stories. Um, but YA specifically came because we had an elective class, and I never would have written YA. And I feel grateful that I had that class because I think that I just thought of myself as someone who couldn't write, because I wrote poetry so much. I thought I can't write like a novel or I can't write like a narrative that's longer. And that class opened me up to that. And I feel grateful for it because I don't know, I was like my teacher asked like, "Oh, like what would you like want to write for your younger self?" And that became like what this book is like I would want to give my younger self like evidence that like you can fall in love with someone like you and like that you can be accepted in a lot of ways and you can explore these intense questions about gender and identity. And so I wrote that. And then after that, I've just been loving writing YA novels. Some of them might not ever be published, but some of it can be for myself. I think that that's also something that I've been giving myself permission to do since the pandemic. I have a lot of projects and I write all the time. My writing practice is a little ridiculous. I get up at like 5 a.m. every morning and I write for like 3-ish hours. Um, but it's like fun. Part of it's like entertainment. Like everyone's like, "Oh, you're so dedicated." I'm like, some of it is literally just like my own entertainment, and some of the books will like probably never see the world, but it's
Mhm.
fun. Yeah,
So 5 a.m., you get up, you drink some coffee, you sit down
Mm.
and write for 3 hours.
But yeah, and I mean, like I get up around
Incredible.
sometimes, and my dogs need a bone, so like there's
Yeah, yeah.
interruptions.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm good at taking breaks. Are you kidding? Is that the
Yeah.
only time you write during the day, or do you come back to it throughout
Yeah,
the day?
that's, like, the only time that, like, my brain works for it. I think it's
Mm,
because I've trained myself now. Like,
mhm.
I can't write at any other time. I have to revise at night, though. I can't revise in the morning. I don't know, I set my brain up like that, which is unfortunate because I'm both, like, a morning person and a late night person, which
Uh-huh.
creates a not sleeping person. But
Yes, it
it's
does.
just, like, how my brain works, I can't really help it. But
Totally.
yeah.
I write from 9 o'clock at night till 1 or 2. So I like hang out during the day, do my stuff, and then settle in. We're on opposite schedules.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're like, yeah. I think that like it makes sense though. I have so many friends who can only write at night, and I think it's because it's like those are the quiet hours of the day, and
Mhm.
like the space for like self reflection, and like it is very creative time.
Definitely. I love the cover of your book too. It's nice. What was the process like to get to the cover?
I feel like I was really gifted the cover because like and by gifted I mean like I didn't really have a whole lot of thoughts. I was like I would love the boys on the cover, and then like I was like I think that I personally enjoy the image of so when they let go of their names, they imagine their names like their dead names. They imagine their names as like moths that they're letting go. And I was
Mm.
like, oh well, I think that those are like aesthetic. Those are cool. That was like most. I don't think I gave much direction. I gave physical descriptions of the characters, and the artist named Jess X Snow. They are like a stunning illustrator and artist. Like if you and filmmaker too. Like if you
Mm.
Google Jess X Snow and like look at their work, they're amazing. And then the book cover designer named Liz, she took their art and like just made this amazing cover too. So like I don't know, I just feel like very grateful. People say that they like it all the time, and I'm like I just feel very lucky to have their art part of it, and I really feel like it captures like I don't know the boys like I don't know high school trans boy loving, and then like some of the like there the book is realism, but there is like a little bit of like dips into magical thinking, and I think that some of that's captured there too with the moths and the like. I think that the magical thinking comes into play in like imagining these escapes as like because sometimes they pretend to be the soldiers, and like I think that there's like a little bit of escape there.
For sure. Which we all did in high school, right?
Yeah,
Just trying to
yeah,
find little ways to be ourselves.
definitely, yeah.
So now that you've released a book, you're a published author, like what's the advice that you're going to bestow on the younger people who also want to write?
I guess I guess I would say to hmm, I've been trying to be more careful with advice because I think
Hmm.
previously I might have said write all the time or something. I think that I would probably tell people to like explore the thing. I really feel like following if you're writing YA or for youth, I think exploring the things that you feel like you needed is a really authentic way to like enter into
Mm.
I don't know conversations or things that you wish that you could have seen when you were younger. And I feel like that might be specific to queer people, but I feel like everybody, no matter like what, I don't know, background you have, you probably were, there were things that you probably wanted. Um, but yeah, I guess I would say to like trust yourself and keep writing. Oh, I do have one advice that you should keep writing even when you think it's bad because you need to finish it and then you can no matter if you like it or not, you're going to have to like keep working on it. So like keep writing even when you hate it a little bit. I mean, it's not good to like totally hate your own work, but I feel like it's natural to like if you've been with a project for like a year or something, like you're going to start to be like this doesn't work and I hate it. And then you'll
Right.
take 2 more hours and you'll be like, okay, it's fine. We can work
Hmm.
on this. Yeah, I guess I would tell people to like keep pushing through. And if you're trying to push through something, like find things that excite you still about the project. Because there's probably like scenes or characters and then like leaning into those things.
Definitely. We've all hit those moments like, I'm just going to throw this one away, start over. It'll be
Yeah,
fine. It'll be fine.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and
So
I feel
through
like it,
this, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I feel like people feel discouraged a lot of times when like it might not be working out. And I think I would also say to people to be gentle with yourself. Like
Hmm.
it's hard to be creative in any way. Especially I feel like writing and I'm not trying to say I don't know anything about other art forms, but like it just feels intensely like brain personal. So like it's hard, it's like looking at a huge piece of yourself. So to be gentle with yourself.
I love that. I love that. So now that you've done the whole thing, sold the book, did the revisions, did all the marketing. Like, what was your favorite part of all of this? What was the best? What was, what surprised
Oh,
you?
the best. That's so interesting. I guess like the best thing is like I love when I've only recently got to hear from like teen readers, but like getting like a DM from a teen reader that's like, this
Mhm.
is amazing and it's in my library, like that kills me. That's
Mhm.
everything. That's all
Yes.
I wanted. um I feel like similar to that feeling, but in a totally different thing is like the cover process was really cool because the art was
Mhm.
so exciting and like exactly what I wanted it to be. Um, and in a totally, I'm also a very optimistic person. I realize in a lot of ways, and so every time I'm listing something, I'm like, oh well, I kind of liked other parts too. And like I'm like physically very stressed by revisions, but I also and I did not like the process of revising, but I also think that it helped me discover so much more about the book. So in a lot of ways I like am so grateful for it and like
Mhm.
appreciative for all of the ways in which like my editor and my agent like helped bring these characters into the world. And even if it was like unpleasant, like the I think that the unpleasantness I feel is like a, oh no, is this so bad? There's nothing we can do to save it. And then you like read the comments and you're like, okay, no, this is like that there's more things to unlock here. And so I think I'm also like
Mhm.
really grateful for that too. And I felt that way. I feel that way about revising anything. I feel like, oh no, my life is over.
Oh yeah.
That's dramatic.
It's like the first day spiral. You're like, oh well,
Yes,
none of it works.
yes.
So yeah.
And now at this point, I'm like, I just know I have to get through the first 2 days after reading, like, an editorial letter or something, and then I'll be
Mhm.
fine, and then it's totally okay. It's just that initial, like, "There's so much wrong." It's like, it's not wrong, it's just it's a piece of art, you need to work on it a little bit more.
Right, exactly. How far are you with writing the cowboy book? Like, is there
There is a manuscript. It's not
nice?
been sold or sent anywhere, but it's I mean, I can tell you it's like make-believe title if it were to be a title. It's called The Notorious Alan Crowell, and he is an outlaw, and he's
Love it.
avenging his father.
That's amazing. I don't think I've seen a trans cowboy fiction.
I hope that
Maybe
there's
Von
more.
Morgan.
I want I want a lot of trans cowboy
Lot of
fiction.
cowboys.
Yeah.
Yes. Every genre, more trans writers.
Every genre, yeah, that's how I feel.
Mhm.
I feel like for so much of my life, I've had like 4 books with trans characters that I can Google, and then like in the last few years, there's been like this wonderful, brilliant explosion, and like I just feel so
Mhm.
grateful for it because I think about what I think about is that like younger people will be able to Google and have like choices of like where they would want to, and like the queer books that I had when I was younger, which is probably like 5 books.
Yeah.
There's probably more out there, but books that actually like reached my small high school
Mhm.
are not very many. And I loved them, and I thought they were amazing and all that kind of stuff. But I'm excited that like people will have so many choices and so many perspectives because like it's so necessary not even just have trans characters, but trans characters of all different backgrounds. Like
Mhm.
so, yeah,
Yes. There's so much stuff going on with Texas and the trans kids and sports, but like the
yeah,
progress that has been made. I grew up in the 90s. There were no books about
yeah,
trans people. I try to, when I get down about the other stuff, I think of like how far we've come in my lifetime and how far it'll
yeah,
be in 20 more years, too. And we're a
yeah,
part of
definitely,
that. Me and you
yeah.
and AJ, too.
I feel very I feel very lucky too. Like sometimes I think I was talking about this a little bit earlier before we started. It's just like I feel lucky that like I get to share like part of myself and part of my story, and I know a lot of people haven't gotten a chance to do that. So I don't know. That's just something that I think about too. I feel like I'm very grateful, and I don't know. I hope that it can spark more stories because that's really what we need.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, let me ask there's a question. If anybody else has questions, I think you can ask them and we'll do this. Okay, ready? Ready, Robin? Question for both of you, if you feel like answering. What books do you feel are in conversation with Revolutions and Stay Gold? And are there any books coming out in the future you're excited to read? You first.
Oh, in conversation, there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm always worried about saying in conversation because they're like, I don't know. I think of most. It's so interesting. Like even people who are my contemporaries, I think of as like superstars. So I'm worried to say it. But a book that really inspired some of the formatting of Million Quiet Revolutions would probably be like Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then like as far as thinking about like formats of poems and stuff like that, um I'm not sure if it's in conversation, but I think it is. I like really just love Elizabeth Acevedo's work. I think that
Mm-hmm.
like what she does, I don't know if it's in conversation because her poems are so like just amazing, and I don't know if mine are as amazing, but I would hope to be in a similar verse exploration as that. Um and then also I think recently well, not recently, I guess. Time is so weird these days.
It's not real.
I really love a lot of the romantic conversations and identity in Felix Ever After. I really love that book, and I would hope to be covered again, like just reaching for things. And I thought of that book too because I'm excited for their middle grade book that's coming out. It's called Mood
Mm-hmm.
Flower.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think so, right? Making sure I got it right. Mood
Yes.
Flower.
And they Kaysen has a audiobook that's about cowboys too.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think so. I might be lying, but I think so.
I will have
I'm
to look it up.
I'm really excited about Mason Deaver's new book.
Oh, yes, I loved they wrote,
Um,
oh my
Wish You the
gosh, Wish
Best.
You All the Best.
Wish You All the
Yes,
Best.
that's a
Amazing.
wonderful book too.
The Ghost We Keep. Such a beautiful writer for sure.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
I
I
don't
saw the cover and I loved it.
the best cover. The
Yeah.
best cover. The dumpster fire. We all
Yes,
relate to that.
yes. I
When
also
I think about
recently sorry.
Stay Gold with the conversation stuff, I think about The Outsiders always constantly
Oh,
because
yeah.
it didn't start there. I saw a person in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, with a tattoo that said "Stay Gold" when I was starting my transition, and I realized, oh, to me that means staying true to yourself, and I kind of really went with that. And then I reread the Outsiders as I was doing "Stay Gold," and it was interesting, all the violence, all the like, you know, a beautiful book, but it was exciting to take a different look at what stay gold means, because in the Outsiders it felt like it was talking about remaining innocence around all this violence,
Yeah,
and when I thought of trans people, I don't think there's an option of innocence for us,
yeah.
and so it felt like, what does that mean for a trans person? Let's look at that. So that was really interesting to do too.
That is so interesting. I love that, like, re-exploration of the phrase.
Right, right.
Yeah, because I loved that book when I was in high school.
Have you reread it? Do you reread the classics?
I haven't yet. I'm always worried because I'm like, I really love this book, and what if it's like, well, not what if. I'm like, I know that there's going to be problematic things here because I read it when I was like, what, like 15? I did not know.
Mhm.
Like, because I think about like one of the books that I like when I was younger was like Catcher in the Rye, which I
Oh
know, I know if I open it again, I'll be like, oof, it's not the best.
yeah.
But yeah. I'm trying to
I
think of what
I need to read that book too. I have it right here, Catcher in the Rye. Like you, I was like, should I revisit it? Why would I do that?
I'm curious now, and I might. I'm trying to think about like what older books that I read from when I was younger that might resonate with A Million Quiet Revolutions.
Mm,
Um, I really like. I mean, it's not specifically the same, but I hope to pick up some of. I'm trying to make sure I get the title right. Thank you for. I'm so glad that there's a Google.
right?
Um, yeah, Two Boys Kissing by David Levithan.
Mm,
I really, I don't, it was one of the first. like gay books I read, and it had a trans character in it. And like when at the point when I read it, I there was not very many books with trans characters that I read, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's a trans boy and he's gay. Like this is amazing." um, yeah,
That author is amazing, David Leventhal. Like the things he's done. He's president of Scholastic, which is
I
crazy.
heard that. I know that
So,
now. I was like, "Wow, it's amazing."
I've heard really good things about how he treats the employees and stuff. Maybe it's not all true, but yeah, I really respect him for what he's done. Okay, here's another question. I don't have any answers to it, but I hope you do. What kind of
Ah,
graphic novels do you have on your bedside table? Or visual
oh,
art, Andy Warhol? Judith asked that.
oh, a lot of so graphic novels. Um, trying to think of uh, I really like. I'm always worried about getting people's names wrong, so I have to
Me too.
Google it.
And I
Um,
pronounce them wrong always because I get
yeah, and
nervous.
I really like a specific Gene Yang, um, who wrote American Born Chinese. His graphic novels, I just wanted to look up that one because I remembered the title. His graphic novels are amazing, and they're really complicated and surreal stories. I was talking about this with you before the thing started, but like oh no, I was talking with ER about it. I love like surrealist things. I'm not always able to write it in a novel, but I for specifically for graphic novels, I love like super weird stuff. But then I also love memoirs. Like I love um anything Alison Bechdel's done. And then
Mhm.
for like art books, one of the things, so I like wanted to treat myself when I like sold A Million Quiet Revolutions. And one of the things I bought was this very expensive Salvador Dali cookbook.
Nice.
Um, because it's just so I'm fascinated by like this is getting into my strange poet
Love it.
brain,
Love
but
it.
I'm fascinated by like weird food things. And this like art book thing is just like escapades in strange food um and I love surrealism and all that kind of stuff. So I love Salvador Dali. I don't know much about art from like a art perspective. Like I'm not, you know, I don't know. I don't have a degree in art. I just look at it and think about what poems could emerge from it. So and then just Keith Haring in general. I love Keith
Mhm.
Haring to death.
Mhm.
I just read his journals, which was fabulous because so he's from my hometown of Kutztown. Um, and in his journals he talks about he talks about taking LSD and walking out into the cornfields. Which was so interesting because it's a very specifically like weird small town kind of thing. And I think it's very beautiful to like think about. I just always find a lot of like motivation or just like comfort in knowing like such a influential pop artist like grew up in like my tiny town
Yes.
and it's cool to like find relics of him there. Like there's still just art that he has there. There's statues and that kind of thing. And so yeah, I love pop artists in general. I think that that's also linked though to like I have similar fascinations to like Andy Warhol stuff of like I don't know, mass produced food or like I don't
Mhm.
like it, but I'm
Mhm.
fascinated. So yeah.
You know, there's a case going to the Supreme Court about Andy Warhol and the Prince photos
Oh
that he did.
really?
Yeah,
Oh.
the Prince.
Oh,
Yeah, they're like suing his estate. Each estate is suing
really?
each other. Yeah.
Interesting. That's
Have you
fascinating.
cooked anything from the Dolly cookbook? Like lasagna?
I
What's in
there was
there?
a second I wanted to try it, but the problem is so the issue with it is there's so many weird ingredients that like
Mhm.
even if I tried to attempt like a normal dish, uh like most of them involve like 40 lobster or like because there's like a lobster tree like and I won't eat it because I'm vegan so like I can't eat anything in it.
Anything
um
in it.
when I bought it I had the intention of trying to make things, but then I realized that you have to like import stuff in order to make most of the stuff in the cookbook. So
I bet.
it is a no, but I actually am like I do like cooking. I love all those kinds of things. um
You just don't have 40 lobsters sitting
no,
around
just not sitting
ready for the
around or
tree.
anyone to eat that many, like yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so it is an important day. It's Transgender Day of Visibility. So we wanted to wrap this up by talking about a few uh, organizations that mean a lot to us. I think ER is going to jump up here. He has to be invited back verbally, he said, like a vampire.
Yes, that's
Summon.
right. I have to let in. I can't cross the threshold otherwise.
Yep.
Thank you both. Tobly, why don't you start out by talking about Stay Gold?
I would love to. So while writing my first novel, Stay Gold, it was during the Trump presidency era. I think we remember that. And he banned trans people from being in the military. And I'm sitting there writing this book, and he banned them because of the high price of gender affirming healthcare that it would supposedly cost the military. So I'm writing a book about a kid with, among many things, is saving up for his top surgery. And I realized then that I really, really wanted to help trans people get the gender affirming resources that they need. So we have raised $60,000 so far for the gender affirming healthcare part. And applications are going up May 23rd. So people can fill out the application. We're going to be giving out money in a couple of months. So exciting. And we started a closet, a donation based closet. And we have a form on our website too. You fill it out and we send you a box of clothing. And why we're doing this is when you first transition, sometimes it's hard to go into a clothing store and ask for what you need. It's hard to order it online. So we have, the like Bushwick stylist. I've helped, some of my friends are helping like curate these boxes and sending them out. So check out that, check out the application. We're just here to like make it easier. That's all we need, right?
That's so cool. And I love that, like, we were first talking about this 2 years ago when we last hosted you, and it's grown so much since then. So
Yes.
congratulations on your hard work, and it's amazing. I'm really excited.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Robin, you also had some resources that you wanted to share. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I might say them in a different order than when I originally thought about them, but I just wanted
Cool.
to talk about some organizations if you're ever looking for places to donate or support. The first one is Project Silk of Lehigh Valley, where I live. They're a youth drop-in center. We provide resources for LGBTQ youth every day after school. They provide everything from like emergency food items to just like a place to feel like safe and affirmed. They provide like counseling and HIV testing, all STD testing. The people who work there are amazing, and I just want them to be recognized. And then Project Silk is also part of the organization I work for, which is called Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center. And we do basically the same thing, but for adults. And we also run arts and culture programs. So if you're ever thinking of Pennsylvania and you want to donate somewhere, helps keep our programs going. And then the last place, and also I'll say about us, is we have a lot of virtual groups. So if you're based in other places and you need a group for a very specific identity, we have a lot of different aspects of the rainbow covered. Um, then the last place I wanted to mention is Eastern PA Trans Equity Project. Um, they do a lot of different kinds of services for people in Eastern Pennsylvania, a lot of different counties. But primarily, a lot of the things that they give out is grants for name change and support for name change to really help people uh, get all their documents changed so that they can feel safe applying for jobs and like recognized in their places of work. So they provide like money and just peer support and that kind of thing. But they provide all kinds of other things too. So just wanted to recognize those.
That's
Awesome. And then you also mentioned two national orgs, so I'm going to drop those in the chat as well. So one is
Yes.
translifeline.org.
Yes. Yeah, they're
You
amazing.
want to speak about that?
Yeah, I really when I was first coming out, there were resources that I used, and I really appreciate the way in which the Lifeline is very like just forward thinking in terms of like being abolition minded and like just very caring. And I've just met with many people who've worked there and who are volunteered there, and the way that having trans people support trans people on a crisis line is just transformative, and I think that it's amazing.
We also have smile.org, which I dropped in
Oh,
there as
yes.
well.
Yes, they're amazing too, and they provide a lot of resources for youth. They're based out of DC area, but they do stuff that is open to youth in all different kinds of areas, and I even know some youth locally who access some of their resources.
That's great. Well, thank you all for these important resources. That's one of the things that Charis gets the most calls about. So, we have our trans youth groups, but we get calls from people all over the country being like, my friend is in this town, or my cousin, or whoever. So it's always great for me to know, particularly the hyper local orgs, because I think there's just so much that we can't cover and we don't know. So I'm always glad to increase our network. And of course, I want to encourage folks to buy A Million Quiet Revolutions. So we were talking in the green room about how it's wonderful for young people to read this book, but it also can be a real gift for adult trans people to go back and read YA books and rethink, like the love stories that you might have missed as a teen reader. So that is certainly true of Tobly's work as well. Like, it's just nice to sort of relive those years through a young person's eyes in fiction. So click this teal button at the bottom of your screen to buy A Million Quiet Revolutions from Charis. You can also buy Tobly's work there and support trans authors. Buy these books for school libraries, for schools, for teenagers. As we know right now, so many of our books are being questioned and under attack. So it's super important that we find alternative networks even to get these books in the hands of kids. One of the things that Charis does is, just pop them in a little free library. You never know who might find it at the right time. There's all kinds of good ways to get them out in our community, but it really does make a huge difference. You never know when a book will quite literally save a kid's life. So many of us were saved by seeing ourselves in books. So thank you both for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to talk, Robin.
Thank you so much for all your questions and conversation, and for having me at Charis.
Yeah, congratulations. This is a big deal, and look forward to queer trans cowboys in the future.
Yeehaw.
Yeah.
We'll be waiting. But until then, I hope that you both stay safe and well. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Take care.